Whenever I listen back to something I do, it just makes me feel weird.
It started with a voice that didn't belong to a 13-year-old girl from a small town in County Durham, England. Courtney Hadwin was sitting in the waiting area backstage at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles in 2018, surrounded by hundreds of other hopeful performers, each convinced they had what it took to win America's Got Talent. But Courtney wasn't thinking about winning. She wasn't even entirely sure what to expect. What she knew was that she had trained for this moment her entire life, or at least, it felt that way. She had the voice of someone twice her age, the confidence of a seasoned performer, and something else that couldn't be taught: raw, undeniable soul. When her name was called, she walked onto that stage in front of millions of viewers, some watching live, millions more who would see the clip within hours on social media. The judges barely looked up at first. A child. Another kid with a dream. They'd seen hundreds like her. Then she opened her mouth. By the end of her first note on Etta James's Piece of My Heart, Simon Cowell's jaw was literally open. Howie Mandel was leaning forward. Mel B was shocked. The audience erupted into applause before she'd even finished the opening verse. And within days, that performance went viral. Millions of views. Trending worldwide. The girl with the soul voice. The kid who sang like an old-school legend. Suddenly, the world wanted to know, who is Courtney Hadwin? But the real story didn't start on that stage in Los Angeles. It started years earlier, in a quiet corner of northern England, where a young girl fell in love with music that her friends had never heard of. Courtney grew up in Dalton-in-Furness, a small coastal town near the Lake District. Her parents recognized early that she had something special, not just musical talent, which she clearly possessed, but a deep emotional connection to music. While other kids her age were listening to pop radio and contemporary artists, Courtney was obsessed with soul legends. Etta James, Aretha Franklin, Amy Winehouse, Mariah Carey. Artists known for emotional depth, technical brilliance, and voices that could shake you to your core. This wasn't a phase. This was her identity. Her parents supported her completely. They enrolled her in vocal lessons, drove her to performances, and encouraged her to perform wherever possible: school events, local competitions, community gatherings. By the time she was 10 years old, Courtney had already performed in front of hundreds of people. She'd won local singing competitions. She'd been a featured soloist at events around the region. But here's the thing, she never saw it as unusual. To Courtney, this was just what she did. She sang. That's who she was. The training was rigorous. Her vocal coaches pushed her to refine her technique, to understand phrasing, to unlock the emotional truth in every song. They taught her how to control her breath, how to use her diaphragm, how to sustain notes with power and precision. But what couldn't be taught, what made Courtney truly exceptional, was her instinctive understanding of soul music. She didn't just sing the notes. She felt the story. She understood the pain, the longing, the triumph in these songs written by artists decades before she was born. Her school friends thought she was different. And she was. While they were watching pop music videos and dreaming about teenage celebrities, Courtney was studying vocal technique and practicing covers of Aretha Franklin. While they were experimenting with the latest trends, she was deepening her connection to timeless music. But Courtney never felt like an outsider. She had her passion. She had her family's support. She had her teachers who believed in her talent. That was enough. By age 12, Courtney had already performed at major regional events and was gaining recognition in singing circles. Local newspapers had covered her performances. Music teachers knew about her. She'd become something of a local celebrity in the northwest of England. The girl with the voice that made you forget you were listening to a child. The girl who sang with more maturity and emotional depth than performers twice her age. Then, in early 2018, an opportunity emerged that would change everything. America's Got Talent was holding auditions, and Courtney's family decided to take a chance. They booked flights to Los Angeles. They submitted the audition tape. They waited, and then they got the call. Courtney had been selected to audition for one of the biggest talent shows in the world. The show that had launched careers. The show with millions of viewers. The show where unknowns became household names overnight. For a 13-year-old from a small English town, it felt almost unreal. Courtney was nervous, of course, but she was also ready. She had trained for years. She had performed hundreds of times. She had the voice. Now she just needed the world to hear it. The weeks leading up to the audition were surreal. Her family made the travel arrangements. Media outlets in England began picking up the story, local girl heading to America's Got Talent. Her school was excited. Her community rallied around her. Everyone wanted to know what would happen. Would she make it past the judges? Would she get a standing ovation? Could this be the moment that launched her career? On the day of her audition, Courtney stood backstage in that waiting area, surrounded by hundreds of other dreamers, and waited for her name to be called. She wore a simple black outfit that made her look older, more professional. Her hair was done. She was ready. She knew what she was going to sing, Piece of My Heart by Etta James. Not an easy choice. Etta's version is iconic, dripping with emotional intensity and raw vocal power. Many performers wouldn't dare attempt it. But Courtney had been studying this song, living with it, understanding it. She was ready. The stage lights hit her face, and for a moment, Courtney Hadwin felt completely calm. This was it. This was the moment she trained for. Not just the years of vocal lessons or the hundreds of local performances, but the moment she'd been building toward her entire life. She looked out at the judges. She looked at the audience. And she opened her mouth. The first note that came out wasn't just singing. It was a statement. It was the voice of someone who had lived through heartbreak, who understood loss, who could channel decades of soul music history through her 13-year-old body and make it sound like the most natural thing in the world. Yes, I want you to want me, baby. Those opening lines of Etta James's Piece of My Heart came out with such raw power that the entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath. Simon Cowell's eyes went wide. He literally stopped mid-expression, stunned. Howie Mandel leaned forward as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Mel B's face shifted from skepticism to shock. The audience erupted. But Courtney kept singing, completely focused on the song, on delivering the emotional truth of every word. Her voice soared through the chorus. She hit notes with precision and power. She controlled her breath. She told the story that Etta James had told decades before. By the end of the performance, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The judges were shaking their heads in disbelief. This wasn't just good for a 13-year-old. This was exceptional, full stop. This was the kind of voice that shouldn't exist in someone so young. This was the kind of performance that reminded you why you watch talent shows in the first place. Because occasionally, you get to witness something truly special. Simon Cowell didn't need to say much. That was absolutely incredible, he said, his voice carrying the weight of genuine amazement. The other judges echoed his sentiment. Yes after yes. The standing ovation continued. Courtney had done it. She'd walked onto that stage and delivered one of the most shocking, impressive performances of the season. Within hours, the clip was online. Within a day, it had millions of views. Within a week, it was trending worldwide. 13-year-old soul singer shocks judges, headlines exploded across entertainment news sites, social media, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. People who'd never watched America's Got Talent were watching Courtney's performance. Musicians were commenting on her technical skill. Soul music legends were being asked what they thought of this girl who sang their songs better than many professionals. The internet had found its new obsession, the girl from England with the voice of a legend. The media descended on Dalton-in-Furness. News crews showed up at her school. Local newspapers ran front-page stories. BBC picked up the story. International outlets covered it. Suddenly, everyone in the UK knew about Courtney Hadwin. She went from being a talented local girl to an overnight international sensation. And she was still 13 years old. Her social media accounts exploded. Instagram followers jumped from hundreds to hundreds of thousands within days. YouTube subscribers poured in. People wanted to know everything about her. Where was she from? How long had she been singing? What was her favorite music? Did she have any other videos? What were her dreams? The curiosity was insatiable. Courtney handled it with remarkable maturity for her age. She did interviews. She talked about her love of soul music. She explained how she trained for years. She spoke about her family's support and her teacher's guidance. But beneath the poised exterior, something else was happening. The reality of sudden fame was setting in. One moment, she was a talented girl from a small English town. The next moment, she was a viral sensation, a social media phenomenon, a girl whose face was recognized around the world. People stopped her on the street. Fans wanted photos and autographs. Messages poured in, some supportive, some critical, some just overwhelming in their sheer volume. The attention was flattering, yes, but it was also intense and, at times, genuinely frightening. She was still in school, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while her entire life had shifted overnight. She had homework. She had friends. She had the ordinary concerns of a 13-year-old. But now she also had a level of fame that most people never experience, let alone teenagers. The momentum from America's Got Talent continued to build. The show kept her in the competition. She advanced to the next rounds. With each performance, more people watched. With each elimination she survived, the stakes grew higher. The pressure intensified. But Courtney kept delivering. Each performance was thoughtfully chosen, emotionally delivered, technically impressive. She was no one-hit wonder. She was a legitimate talent with range and maturity that defied her age. Record labels started circling. Managers wanted to represent her. Offers came in for collaborations, performances, appearances. The business side of entertainment suddenly became very real. Meetings were held. Discussions happened about her future. Options were explored. It was exciting and overwhelming in equal measure. But through it all, Courtney remained grounded. Her family kept her centered. They reminded her of why she started singing in the first place. Because she loved music, because she loved telling stories through songs, because the connection to soul music was deeper than fame or recognition. They protected her privacy as much as possible. They limited her schedule. They made sure she still had time to be a teenager, to spend time with friends, to maintain her education. Still, the momentum was undeniable. This girl was going places. Everyone could see it. The question wasn't whether Courtney Hadwin would become a successful performer. The question was how far she would go, how big her career would become, what heights she would reach. No one could have predicted that the greatest challenge of her life wouldn't come from competition or pressure or the music industry. It would come in a completely different form, something that would test her in ways her voice never could have prepared her for. But that story was still ahead of her. For now, Courtney Hadwin was on top of the world. Success was intoxicating, and for a moment, Courtney Hadwin believed that the momentum would never stop. The America's Got Talent competition had catapulted her to a level of fame that most artists work their entire lives to achieve. She was in her mid-teens now, performing at major venues, building a fan base that extended across multiple continents. Recording deals were being discussed. Tour dates were being scheduled. Festival appearances were lining up. Everything was accelerating. Everything was moving upward. And then, in 2019, while Courtney was traveling to one of her performances, everything suddenly stopped. It happened during a tour, while she was en route to an event. The details were initially unclear, the kind of incident that you hear about but don't fully register until it becomes your reality. A bus accident. Courtney was injured. The exact nature and severity of the injuries weren't immediately known to the public, but what became clear very quickly was that this wasn't a minor setback. This was serious. When the full story emerged, it became apparent just how devastating the situation truly was. Courtney had suffered a fractured kneecap, a significant orthopedic injury that would require extensive recovery time. She also sustained a mild concussion, which came with its own set of complications and concerns. For a young performer whose career was built on physical stamina, vocal precision, and the ability to move across a stage with confidence and energy, these injuries were catastrophic. The immediate consequences were swift and brutal. Performances were canceled. Tour dates were postponed. The momentum that had built for months came to an abrupt halt. Here was a girl who had trained her entire life to perform, who had just achieved the success she'd worked toward, who had the world's attention and opportunity within her grasp, and suddenly, she couldn't perform at all. The physical pain was one thing. A fractured kneecap is genuinely painful. The recovery involves immobilization, physical therapy, restricted mobility, and a long rehabilitation process. Courtney had to wear a brace. She had to limit her activities dramatically. She couldn't stand for long periods. She couldn't move freely. Even simple tasks became challenging. But the psychological impact was potentially even worse. Imagine being at the peak of your career at age 15 or 16. Imagine having the world's attention. Imagine having opportunities and possibilities opening up in every direction. And then imagine having it all taken away, at least temporarily, through no fault of your own. The frustration must have been overwhelming. The fear about whether she would fully recover was real. Would the injury affect her ability to perform long-term? Would her voice be impacted? Would she lose the momentum she'd built? Would people forget about her while she was recovering? These are the questions that haunted her during those early weeks of recovery. Courtney returned to her home in England, away from the bright lights and constant attention of the entertainment world. Back in Dalton-in-Furness, in the quiet community that had supported her since the beginning, she began the long process of physical rehabilitation. Physical therapists worked with her on her knee. Doctors monitored her concussion recovery. Her family surrounded her with support and love during what must have felt like one of the darkest periods of her young life. The concussion added another layer of complexity to her recovery. A mild concussion still affects cognitive function, balance, and overall well-being. Courtney had to limit screen time. She had to be careful about physical exertion, even light activity that might normally seem harmless. Rest was essential, but rest is difficult when you're young and ambitious and used to constant activity and stimulation. What people don't always understand about injuries like this is that the psychological recovery is often harder than the physical recovery. Your body will eventually heal. The bones will knit back together. The swelling will go down. But your mind has to process trauma, fear, and disappointment. Courtney had to deal with all of that while her body was mending. During this period, music became something different for her. It shifted from being her career, the thing she did to perform and entertain audiences, to being her therapy, the thing that helped her process what she was going through. She began writing. Sitting at home, unable to perform, unable to tour, limited in what she could physically do, Courtney poured her emotions into songwriting. The accident, the pain, the frustration, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it went into her music. These weren't songs designed for commercial success or to impress audiences. These were deeply personal songs, written for herself, about what she was experiencing. And in that process, something important happened. Music became healing instead of pressure. It became a way to process trauma instead of a performance obligation. Her family continued to be her anchor during this time. They protected her privacy. They limited media exposure. They made sure she understood that her recovery was more important than any performance or career opportunity. They reminded her that she was more than her ability to sing or perform. She was their daughter, their sister, their loved one, and they cared about her well-being far more than they cared about her fame. The physical therapy was grueling. Rehabilitation from a fractured kneecap involves months of careful, incremental progress. First, just regaining basic mobility. Then, gradually building strength back into the leg. Then, slowly increasing activity levels. It's a process that demands patience, persistence, and trust that the body will eventually respond. But Courtney showed remarkable resilience. She attacked her physical therapy with the same dedication she brought to her vocal training. She was determined to recover fully. She was determined to return to performing. But this time, the motivation was different. This wasn't about fame or success or proving herself to the world. This was about reclaiming her life, her body, her identity. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, incrementally, Courtney began to improve. The pain lessened. Her mobility increased. Her strength returned. Her concussion symptoms faded. And with each small victory, each milestone in her recovery, her confidence grew. She was going to come back. She didn't know when. She didn't know how. But she was going to come back. The question was, what would that comeback look like? 6 months after the accident, Courtney Hadwin stood backstage at a charity benefit concert in Newcastle, her hands trembling slightly as she waited for her cue. Her knee felt stronger now. The brace was off. She'd been cleared by her doctors to return to performing. But this wasn't just any performance. This was her comeback. This was the moment she would prove to herself, and to the world, that the accident hadn't taken away what made her special. The venue was packed. News of her return had spread. Fans who'd been waiting months to see her perform again were in the audience. Media outlets had covered her comeback announcement. Everyone wanted to know, could she still do it? Had the injury affected her voice? Would she be the same performer? When she walked onto that stage in Newcastle, the crowd erupted in applause before she'd even sung a note. It was a welcome back ovation, an outpouring of support from people who'd followed her journey, who understood what she'd been through, who wanted to see her succeed. She opened her mouth and sang. And everything came flooding back, not just her voice, which remained as powerful and emotionally resonant as ever, but her entire sense of self. She was Courtney Hadwin. She was a performer. She was a survivor. The accident hadn't taken that away. If anything, it had deepened her understanding of what it meant to persevere, to overcome, to refuse to be defined by circumstances beyond your control. The performance was triumphant. Reviews called it emotional and powerful. Videos of the performance circulated online. Fans celebrated her return. The comeback narrative that had been building in people's minds was confirmed. Courtney Hadwin was back. But something had shifted internally. The success, the fame, the industry attention, they were still there. But they no longer felt like the ultimate goal. Courtney had been forced to confront what really mattered during her recovery period. She'd learned that her identity extended beyond performances and accolades. She'd discovered the healing power of music when it wasn't tied to external validation. She'd been reminded by her family and community that her value as a person had nothing to do with her career achievements. So when she began performing again, when the tour offers returned, when the industry momentum picked up once more, Courtney approached it differently. She was more intentional about her choices. She was more protective of her well-being. She was thinking about the future in a way that extended beyond her own career. In 2019 and beyond, Courtney released new music, an EP that showcased the songs she'd written during her recovery period, the deeply personal material that had helped her heal. These songs were rawer than her covers of classic soul songs. They were contemporary and deeply honest. Critics noted the maturity in her songwriting, the emotional depth, the way she transformed her pain into art. But here's where Courtney's story took an unexpected turn. While her peers in the entertainment industry were focused on building their personal brands and expanding their fame, Courtney began thinking about giving back. She started teaching. Young singers from her community and beyond would come to her for vocal lessons and mentorship. She didn't charge exorbitant rates. She was genuinely invested in helping the next generation of musicians develop their craft, find their voice, and pursue their dreams. More significantly, Courtney established a small scholarship fund for young musicians in her hometown. The Courtney Hadwin Music Scholarship became a real thing, a tangible way for her to take the opportunities and success she'd been given and extend them to others who shared her passion but might not have her resources or circumstances. Young people from Dalton-in-Furness and the surrounding region could now apply for funding to support their musical education and training. Think about what that means. Here was a girl who, just a few years earlier, was a local talent with a dream. She'd gotten her shot. She'd achieved massive success. She'd been tested by injury and adversity. And rather than retreating into herself or using her platform purely for personal gain, she chose to build a bridge back to her community. She chose to create opportunities for others the way opportunities had been created for her. This is the moment where Courtney Hadwin's story transforms from being simply about talent and success into something deeper. It becomes a story about character. It becomes a story about what you do with the platform you're given. It becomes a story about using hardship not as an excuse for bitterness but as motivation for compassion. The performances continued. The music career advanced. But it was no longer the only story. The real narrative became about a young woman who understood that she had been given gifts, talent, opportunity, a supportive family, a loving community, and who felt a responsibility to pass those gifts forward. Where is Courtney Hadwin now? She's a working musician and performer who continues to develop her craft and expand her artistry. She's a mentor to young singers. She's an advocate for music education. She's a survivor who transformed personal trauma into personal growth and then into service to others. She's proof that sometimes the most important victories aren't the ones that come from winning competitions or achieving fame. They're the ones that come from choosing compassion, resilience, and purpose over everything else. Her journey from that small English town to the stages of America's Got Talent to a bus accident that could have derailed everything, and her response to all of it, is ultimately a story about the human capacity to endure, to grow, and to choose what matters. So here's what I want to know. What do you think about Courtney's journey? What resonated with you most? Her incredible talent, her resilience through injury, or the way she chose to give back to her community? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about talented performers who overcame adversity and transformed their lives, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got incredible stories coming, and you won't want to miss them. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.